Today, I have a track, and it's a pop EDM track. I was asked to master it. I'll just let you hear what it sounds like. It's a pretty cool track, though.
It was like the other half of me. It was like a fantasy.
So when someone submits a song for mastering, basically my job is to make sure that when you play the song back, it should sound good anywhere you play it. So if you're playing on your phone or you're listening to it with earbuds or in a club or something like that, it needs to sound good. It's processed in such a way so it translates to all these different places. So I'm just going to play this, and then I'll tell you like what I'm hearing and what I think needs to get fixed.
I tried to skip but it just couldn't help.
Okay, so the mix is, I was told the mix is intentionally a little bit dark. So. It sounds like there's almost like a sheet over the mix, and so we need to clean that up a little bit. It's like the mids, there's a little bit muddy. The low end doesn't really sound too extended, so I'm kind of wanting it to move a little bit more air. Like if I was in a club, I want to be able to feel this a little bit more. And I feel like the transients and the punchiness isn't quite there yet. Also, it's missing some air. Like I'm wanting it to like sparkle a little bit more and sound more 3D. Sounds a little bit narrow when I'm listening to it. So let's just kind of hop into it. So the first thing I'm going to do to this track is I want to bring out a little bit more of those transients. So I want to bring out the punchiness of the kick and the snare and all that. So I'm actually going to use this plugin. I've really never used this on a master before, but this is JST, so this is a plugin that's typically used for like drums or guitars or something like that. And it's just basically a transient designer broken down to different bands. So I'm just essentially going to increase the punchiness of the low end a little bit. I'm going to keep everything else off, and then maybe a little bit of the very, very top part, so like the vocals, so that we clean up and make them easier to hear. So let me just show you what this sounds like when we turn this on. So it's gonna be kind of subtle, but you'll listen. There'll be a little bit more thump in the kick, and then there'll be a little bit more brightness in certain spots on the vocals. Let's go to this part of the song. So this is off, and then on. That's off, and then on. So if you're listening to the relationship between the bass and the kick, they're getting a little bit more separated and a little bit more defined. So that's why I'm using this. And then I want to bring out a little bit of the brightness and give it a little bit more in your face kind of sound. So that's why we'll be doing that with this top part of this. So this is off, on. Here, let me show you. If I go way overboard, check out what it does. It like really starts making this unpleasant. So check this out. So what ends up happening is like those hi-hats start getting really loud and irritating, and the vocals start kind of moving around in a weird way. So we're just going to put a little bit of this on. Just to kind of, like I said, we're just bringing the vocals and giving it a little bit more in your face. All right. Remember, there are no rules. Like, just because you read someone or something online or someone says, oh, you can't have crazy minus 7.38 dB cuts on a master, that's garbage. You definitely can. So just like I mentioned before, the song kind of sounded like it had a little bit of a mask over it, and we want to bring out a little bit more of those vocals and make them up front and present, but we don't want it to be bright. The song is not supposed to be super bright. It's supposed to be modern, but not over the top. So the first thing I'm going to do, you can just looking at this equalizer, there's a lot of really low information, like below 20 hertz, that we can see dancing around. You're not going to be able to hear that at all. And it's just making the subwoofer work a lot harder than it needs to, and it's taking the energy away from the song. So the first thing I do is I'm just going to get rid of that. So we're just going to cut some of this really super low bass out. And that's just to give it some more energy for the other bands. So the next thing I'm noticing So the hi-hats. So you hear this like thing going on. And it's a little bit harsh. It's kind of, once we start bringing this song up really loud, it's going to start irritating us. And so I'm just going to very gently dial that back. So let me just bring this back. I'll show you. So we play it. This is the part I'm talking about. You can hear that. Okay, so that's, if we emphasize it, that section is too bright. We want to just pull that back a little bit. So I'm only bringing it down like almost 2 dB, a little bit less than like 1.5 dB, and it's just there to just ease that part. Our ears are really sensitive to this region, and so when we start bringing up the volume towards the end of mastering, that's going to get annoying. And I know that just from experience in working in the genre a lot. The vocals are nice in there right now, but we want to kind of, let's bring them forward a little bit. So actually I'm going to bring in, here's the band that I'm going to increase. So I'm increasing these sounds right here. So that's just like the intelligibility part of the vocal is in this region. So when we're listening to people talk or sing music, it's these frequencies that we're able to understand what they're saying. So I'm bringing this thing up, maybe just like about 1 dB or so. And that just kind of helps with us to hear the vocals and kind of gives them a little louder perception in the mix. I'm not your priority. Not even just one kill. There are these resonant bands so that I can hear that are kind of poking out. I have them muted here, but basically I'll show you what the sound is I hear. It's that one note. So there's these like certain notes that kind of jump out of the mix, and it's this like ambient guitar thing in the beginning. So if we go back and listen, there's these certain things that ring, like right there, that thing. Here, I'll show you. Let me solo this. Check this out. That. It's very prominent. It might be hard to hear that, but in a studio, I can really pick this out. But that note is just ringing, and it doesn't need to ring. It's not musical. It's just, it bothers the hell out of me. So we're going to kill that thing. So we're going to drop this thing. We're going to drop that like 7 or 8 dB. So if I get rid of that, you hear how it kind of rings? Here, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to loop it and drive everybody crazy. Hang on. Okay, hang on. All right, so check this out. This is with me taking out that ringing overtone. Listen. And then when I put it back in, you'll hear it. It's like it completely takes away from the song. So now you can really hear it. You just hear it. It almost sounds like a wine glass, you know? So we want to get rid of that. And so that's what this really sharp cut is doing. It's getting rid of that like wine glass sound. That if it's not musical and it kind of distracts you, you want to get rid of that. And so there's another one that happens a little bit higher than that. So let me unloop this so I don't drive everybody nuts. So check, there's one right here too. Check this out. You can kind of hear it. So for the same reason, so I did the same thing and just removed that very sharp peak there. So that's basically the overall shape. So that solved a lot of problems I had with the mix. So now we're cleaning up the low end. We got rid of the like wine glass whistling stuff, and then we made the vocals a little bit more prominent, and then we got rid of the overly high bright stuff from the hi-hats. So now we're kind of in a nice spot where we can start shaping the EQ. Okay, so to do that, one of my favorites is this PuigTec. This is by Waves. I don't know what it is. It's something magical about this one, but if you change the frequency all the way up to 16K, which is probably higher than most people can hear. And then you have a really broad band. What this does is it just lifts up this airiness of the mix, and it makes it feel so much more spacious in 3D. And it's high enough away from the really bright sibilant parts of the vocal where it's more musical. It sounds nice. It puts like a sheen over the top of the mix. So I'll dial this in and you'll be able to hear how all of a sudden it just starts sounding bright and lush. So check this out. So I'll start turning this up on the chorus here. So this is way too much, okay? But you can hear, now if I go back, it sounds almost like a blanket's back over the mix. So check this out. See, it's bright and open, but it's a little bit harsh. And then this is dark. So we just want to bring in just a little bit so it's enough to really open the mix up a little bit for us. Cool. All right. At this point, we've kind of cleaned up the mix enough where now we can put a compressor in there and then dial it in so it does exactly what we want it to do. The low end isn't super loose anymore, so now we can dial in a nice movement into the mix or groove. And so for that, I'm actually using Pro C2. If this was like a rock song or something or metal, I'd probably use an SSL style. The attack and release times, just the way that it reacts to rock and metal usually is amazing, but for electronic, I try to stay away from that. I guess this isn't too realistic to what like a hardware compressor can do, but we have a lot more control over how the song will breathe using this. But basically, when the kick's hitting, I want it to gently just kind of bob up and down with the rhythm of the song. Okay, so this is without any compression. And then this is when we're dialing in. And you'll feel the music start moving. Okay, we're gonna dial it in. Okay, right here, we're starting to get this nice like groove to it. And the secret to that groove with the compressor, let me show you guys this. I probably have showed you this before, but you can tell just by how beat up this is. I use this a lot. So this is, see if I can get it to focus, hang on. So it's basically a delay timing chart. So it converts the beats per minute into like a time, like milliseconds, okay? So this song is 85 beats per minute, and we can look up how long a quarter note is or an eighth note based on the tempo. And so I always time my release and attack to the tempo of the song. So this is, I think, a 16th note. Let me see, 85. Yeah, so 176.5 milliseconds at 85 BPM is a 16th note. So the compressor is kind of bobbing up and down on the order of a 16th note, but because of the style of this, it's a little bit slower. So it's synced to the tempo, but it gives the song this cool movement and makes it interesting. And without having this on there, the song just it doesn't feel like it goes anywhere. There's something that's missing in my mind when I'm listening to it. That's why I think it's super important that the timing is everything on these compressors. And that's another reason why I'm using this over like an SSL, because I really want to make sure that it's a musical thing. The groove is really being enforced. So, yeah. So if I have it bypassed again, it just kind of is a linear thing, right? It's not moving, not living and breathing. And so I'll turn it on again. So this is bypassed. And then here it is in. So you can feel the song has this cool rhythm now. And then here's without. So now it's just kind of is going. So, and this movement that we have in this stage is going to be subdued as we start increasing the volume and level later on. So something else I notice, usually with electronic music like this, the stereo image is normally huge, like super wide. And this song feels narrow. And so what we can do is we can kind of adjust the relative balance of the song by just turning up the volume of the side information. So anything that's not dead center doesn't increase. So the kick, snare, the vocals, those will all stay the same. But anything that has any type of stereo image, we can turn that up. So check this out. I'm just using like a Waves, this is called Center. But this is just turning up the information on the sides, and you'll hear how wide we can make it sound when we turn up that side information. So I'll let it get to the chorus so you can really hear it. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this up. See, it's almost like now the vocals are like completely surrounding you. And if we take that away, it's all center right now. Now it's super wide, right? But that's kind of crazy. That's very, very wide compared to how the artist had sent it. So it's not a great idea to go that insane with this kind of stuff, but depending on the artist and what they like and what their preferences are, you can just use this to make something sound super wide, but it's not like a fake wide. Not like a spatializer or like a stereo enhancement plugin with phasing. This is just literally volume, so it's going to be phase coherent. Let's go to the next thing. Speaking of stereo enhancing, I'm going to do that right now. You got to be super careful with this stuff because a little goes a very long ways. But again, in this genre, we usually have a lot of width. I want to get it to an unnaturally wide feel, but not without it feeling super fake. You know, you still want to close your eyes and imagine you can see everything going on. Okay, so with this, again, this subtlety is everything. I barely push these things up at all because I'm terrified of what it does to the low end. Check this out. So we're just going to bring it up so we can go crazy with it. So check this out. So that's really wide and the low end gets all screwed up, right? Okay, we do not want that. So this is better. So this is where the original was. And I feel like it's already starting to sound weird if we get to this far, so I'm very subtle, like right here. It just adds a little bit of an extra dimension to the music. And then, so I like to use this, but it has to be very, very, very subtle. Otherwise, like I said, the low end gets weird and it starts phasing and does not work. So we're just going to push this up a little bit. So like about here. And so I'll bypass this so you can hear, but it's this very subtle widening. Ready? Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this. Okay, it's gone. Back in. Off. On. So like I said, very, very little. It's so easy to go overboard with that one. But it's just enough just to really make the sound stage sound. It's like the actual sparkle of magic that people can't really put their finger on. And it's not being very destructive, but it sounds big. And if you have something like headphones or earbuds in, it's going to sound really cool. Like I mentioned earlier, my job is to make sure that this song is going to sound good on all the different devices and things. So it needs to sound good on a cell phone. It needs to sound good in a club. It needs to sound good in a car. So one thing that I like to do when I'm mastering this type of music that's very, very sub-heavy is I'll put on this plugin by Waves called Maxxbass. So this is like a subharmonic generator. So it'll take information from the sub bass and then make a harmonic of that in a higher region so that if you're on a smaller device that doesn't have a subwoofer like a phone or a laptop, it still sounds like it has that low frequency information. It's not like it's completely missing. So this, I think, is really important to have on your master. Otherwise, you're really missing out on a fullness that is normally there with the subwoofer. Okay, so let me just show you what it does. I'll put it on and bypass it here in a second. So really listen to, and if you have a subwoofer, you'll be able to feel the air moving. when I put this on. Let's get to the chorus. That's not going to be helpful. Okay, bypass it. Okay, with it in. So okay, I do have to say one thing. So I do have the input turned down, so it's kind of tricky to hear it because when I turn it on, the volume drops. It's hard to compare exactly what it's doing. But if you're just focusing on the low end, it's adding this nice movement to it. We're gonna keep that on. So the next thing on the song that I think we need to look at is we just want to kind of squeeze the entire mix as it builds up into the chorus. So things start building, and then we have the chorus hit, and we have all these vocals pop in. We need some way to make sure that nothing's jumping out too much. And so the tool I use for that is a multiband compressor. And again, I'm using Fabfilter. Specifically, I normally use a Waves multiband for this, but this I think is a little bit more musical for electronic music. The way I have this set up is when a certain area or certain frequencies are getting too loud, this thing will say, okay, you guys need to chill out for a second. And then it just turns it down in that little frequency band. And so I have like a sub bass band, low mid. This is kind of like a muddy region. So I want to make sure that it doesn't sound too muddy ever. So that'll keep lowering these frequencies to make it sound clear and detailed. And then this is like a vocal presence area, and then this is like the air at the top. And this is where it can get kind of bright, so I want to make sure that it doesn't ever get too harsh. And so if we play it, you'll be able to hear, and you can watch it visually, how it's kind of dialing things back as the song is building. But when there's not a lot of stuff there, it doesn't mess with the mix at all. Very subtly, it's just dancing with the music. And you can see in this region right here, it's constantly lowering that attack in the hi-hats that can be irritating to hear. Especially if you're in a club and this thing's cranked up, you're not going to want that to be too bright. So, and then again, that's that vocal presence that I want to make sure we keep that up front. So I'm actually boosting some of the volume in this region to make sure that it maintains a certain level of that clarity. And then if there's too much, then it starts taking it away. So we have a little bit of presence there the entire time. Cool. All right, so if we listen, it sounded pretty good. Like this mix is starting to open up. It's starting to sound expensive. There's a nice separation between the kick and the bass. So the next thing I want to do is I'm just going to do some very broad band EQ moves here, where I'm going to just open up the top end a little bit more. So this without that, and then we're going to bring it in. So here, I'm exaggerating this so you can hear it. You hear how the vocals are starting to get nice and present? But it's a little bit harsh, right? So we got to be very careful. And there's also some overlap with those stupid hi-hats again. So we're trying to brighten up the vocals without getting those hi-hats too bright. Okay? So I think without this, it's a little dark. And it's a little bit hard to hear the vocal. But when it's in, it just opens it up a little bit. Okay? And then, cool. This thing, so this is like my secret weapon. And I think I've talked about this before on some of my videos. This is called Soothe. It's basically an intelligent de-esser, I guess, or an intelligent multiband compressor. It's pretty magical. I don't like to buy plugins because I try to keep things simple, but I had no choice. I had to buy this one. And what this does is this will take all the really harsh frequencies that we have in our mix that are too difficult to go in and individually lower with an EQ, and it does it in a very, very transparent way. So I'll show you what it takes. We can set this up so we can hear what it's taking out of the song. you'll hear it's a lot of this like ringing, the stuff that I EQ'd earlier that had that like the wine glass sound. This will go in and we can dial it in and selectively take away only the most harsh frequencies as they pop into the song. So it's really nice because it won't mess with anything only when it gets too harsh. Check this out. I'll play like the chorus. Listen, this is what it's taking out. So if you can hear that, it's some of the hi-hats and it's the really bright sibilant things on the vocal. Okay? It's very subtle, but when those things are gone, it's so much more pleasing to take this song and just crank it up, and it doesn't like hurt your ears. It's pretty incredible. I'm gonna turn this down just for the live stream. Cool. And then let me just take it away so you can really listen to what it's doing to the vocal. Okay, back in. So like I said, it's very, very subtle, but you have to be very careful because this plugin has a certain sound to it. And if you do too much of it, all your songs will have this like soothed sound. So let me go overboard with it so you hear what it does. It almost sounds like everybody has a lisp. It sounds like your drums have a lisp, your any of the guitars or anything like that have this weird EQ on it. So listen, if we go overboard, check out what it sounds like. It's like the vocalist has this fat tongue and a lisp all of a sudden. But if we very subtly have it in there, we get rid of all this crap, which is just makes me want to shove a knife through my eye. And it just kind of makes it very pleasant. I don't know. I love it. These guys are amazing. If you mix music or do anything, you got to check this out. Now, at this point, we have everything framed. We have the basic EQ curve that we want for the song. It's sounding pleasant. We got rid of the harshness. There's a nice distinction between the bass and the kick. Now, what we're going to do is just kind of gel everything up. And one way I like to do that is this like tape saturation plugin. This is basically just compressor, and then it adds a little bit of distortion, but it's very musical and it gives it a fullness. So let me just show you what it's going to do when we pull this guy in. So this is without, and this is with it. So I'll dial it back and then go way overboard with it so you can hear the effect, okay? So keep increasing this. Right? That's completely distorted and ruined. And this is without, this has a very little bit amount in there. So right now I feel like it's like a clamp. You're like clamping down on the song to make it really consistent. And you got to find the sweet spot between crushing it too far and then letting it be too loose and have too much movement. This is too far, I think. This is a little bit too loose. So right around like here is a nice balance between the movement and then the fullness that this gives. Here's another like secret weapon I always like to use is this thing. This is a plugin by Sonnox, and I was just at NAMM in California, and I went to their booth to ask them what the heck is going on with this plugin because they don't really talk about what it does. They just say, oh, it makes it louder and it's magical. And so I want to know exactly what it did, and they told me it's just magical. So that's how it gets it louder. It puts a little magic in your music. Kind of hard to believe, but that's what it does, I guess. But what it's really doing is it's saturation, and it's generating harmonics again. But it does it in a very musical way, where it can make a track super loud, but it doesn't feel like it's clamped down. So I love using this towards the end of my mastering chain just to kind of give it volume and fill out anything that's kind of missing. It just gets loud and full and awesome. So this is way too much, right? But it doesn't feel crushed, right? It just feels big. And this is a little bit on the quiet side. So right around here, it has a nice balance between the volume and the sound that it adds. Last step for me is limiting. So one of my favorites is this Pro L plugin by Fabfilter. It's very pleasing. It doesn't sound harsh. It doesn't take away too much of the low end. Let me just show you. Let's play music and I'll just slam it into this thing. Okay. So what this guy's doing is we're turning up the volume, okay? The volume's going up, and then once it hits 0 dB, which is like the loudest we can possibly make music, it'll reduce the volume of anything that goes above that. Very quickly, you can destroy the feeling of the song if you make it too loud, because you take away the natural volume swells and stuff from the composition and the arrangement of the song, and you're just making everything the same volume. You gotta be really careful because you can suck all the feeling out by over-limiting music. But at the same time, we want it to be competitive. So there's this very careful balance that we have to do where we make it louder, but don't suck all the feeling away. And my tool of choice for this particular song was, this Fabfilter plugin. We're gonna get to the point where it's sounding too loud and we're losing that intimacy, and then we're gonna dial it back. Okay, here we go. So we're gonna start pushing up the volume. So right here, we're starting to lose the kick drum. It's starting to sound flat. And we're getting some distortion. This is way too loud. All right. It's getting all crunchy, right? No one wants to listen to that. So dial it way back. So this is where I thought the kick drum was being lost. So it's loud and it sounds kind of cool, but the problem is there's not enough. When it's that loud, there's not enough space for the song to breathe, right? So we want to bring it lower than that. So right around here, we're getting into the sweet spot. I feel like this is okay, but we can make it louder. So like right here I think is like the magic spot. So we have a nice full loud mix. So it's going to keep people excited. Like, when they turn it on, it's going to be loud and full, but it's not distorting. It's not making it crunchy, and it still has a little bit of room for the song to breathe. So at this point, this is where the song is essentially mastered. Something that we always want to check, though, is it's really easy to think that you're making something sound better, and then you get to the end, and you're like, oh man, it sounds great. And all you really did was made it super loud. So we always want to reference it back to the original track. And we want to make sure that it does in fact sound better when the volumes are the same. So again, I'll just run through it really quickly. So we use this transient designer to make the kick drum kind of pop out a little bit more in the mix so that we have better separation between the bass and the kick drum. And then we use this EQ to get rid of these ringing frequencies and kind of emphasize the vocals, and at the same time mellow out the hi-hats a little bit because they were a little bit aggressive. And we also cleaned up this really sub-bass stuff. Then we use this PuigTec EQ to give the song like a sheen, a nice, beautiful, bright airiness to it without being too harsh. And then we use the compressor to dial in some movement from the song. Then we widened out and increased the volume of the sides to give it a little bit bigger stereo width. And then we artificially enhanced the stereo image a little bit more using this Waves S1 stereo shuffler. And so that gives it, so when you're wearing headphones, it gives it almost an impossibly wide, huge spatial soundscape that is pretty prominent in this genre. Okay, and then to make sure that the bass is represented well on things that don't have subwoofers, we use this Maxxbass plugin. And then just to make sure nothing's jumping out as the song builds naturally, we have this multiband compressor to tuck away any frequencies that might be getting harsh over time. I wanted to give it a little bit more of a vocal presence boost here. So we just have a little bit of brightness that we're adding. And then we're taking away any of the resonant frequencies that are building up in the drums or the vocals using the Soothe plugin, which is incredible. And then again, now we're starting to squeeze the mix to gel everything together using this tape and add a little bit of a harmonic distortion. Then we're giving it a little bit more level and width using this Inflator plugin, which again has adds magic to your mixes. And then lastly, we raise our volume using this limiter, and then that brings it up to a competitive volume. So if you found this helpful, let me know. Leave me a comment or something below. Give the video a like. Tell people if you're friends with people in bands or people if you mix your own music or master your music yourself. Share it with others that might find it helpful. That'd be awesome. And I'll keep my eyes open on any comments or anything. So if you guys think of something that you have questions about later, just leave a comment in underneath the video, and I'll pop back in and be sure to answer it. So I'll see you guys at the next video. See ya.
With the best, the beat and the feet, the feeling. My confidence is straight to the ceiling, so you can say that. You said he couldn't